Chippewa Lake is a small village in Medina County, Ohio, with a population of under 800 people. The village shares its name with the lake that it sits on. Today, Chippewa Lake shores are crowded with the townhouses and cottages that were once used as weekend escape homes for wealthy Clevelanders. The village also shares its coastline with an abandoned and derelict amusement park, whose decaying remnants have slowly been reclaimed by nature near the lakeside. Chippewa Lake is a quiet, mostly forgotten place whose glory days are long gone. The people of Chippewa Lake were quite content to be forgotten by the rest of the world and were enjoying their peaceful, quiet village. And then one day, a grisly discovery was made and everything was about to change.
Start with breaking news out of Medina County. A town trustee missing for weeks, just confirmed to be the body found in Chippewa Lake.
When I heard about it, I had like an inclination that that could be the person that was found.
His family and friends with some closure to his mysterious disappearance. But the investigation into how he died is just beginning.
It's highly suspicious.
Self-inflicted crime.
Ready for takeoff.
We are back for season 2 of Invisible Ships, and we are coming out of summer vacation early because our brother-in-law, Darren, who we've never met and we've never discussed before, but is a super exciting guy and is worth talking about, has been in our ear all summer about a case that he's fascinated about. And it's a case that involves the disappearance and ultimately murder of a local politician. He was a township trustee from a rural town nearby where we live.
Yeah, so back when this happened in December 16, right away, that was the subject of conversation at Thanksgiving and Christmas when we would be over there and just kind of chatting about what's going on in the world. And we've followed it ever since. And then just this summer, he got a tip from one of the locals that he works with out there of where the murder weapon may have been dumped in an inlet into the Chippewa Lake.
So Darren, being Darren, actually went out and purchased 2 heavyweight fishing magnets with the hopes that we would be able to recover this murder weapon that was thrown into the Chippewa Lake Inlet.
I just want to make a point here, and this is going to apply to a lot. One of the great things about Rick and one of the great things about Darren is when they do something, they don't do it small. They do it really big.
And so one afternoon, we all got together and we decided to go magnet fishing under a damaged, decades-old concrete bridge over the Chippewa Inlet. Okay, we've successfully snuck our inflatable kayaks into the Chippewa Inlet, and we are paddling around under the bridge. We've dropped our fishing magnets, and we're pulling up a lot of rust and a lot of bridge debris, some nails, nothing really to get excited about, and then all of a sudden, I make the most important discovery of the day.
Pulled this out of the Chippewa Inlet.
Looks like a butter
knife. Could this be the knife that killed Bryon Macron? Or is this something that somebody used to cut bread and butter?
Okay, I'm not convinced that that was the murder weapon. What we found was a rusted old butter knife that looked like it had been in the water for quite a while, and probably has more to do with a century and a half of people enjoying picnics on the shores of Chippewa Lake or to the abandoned amusement park, and very little to do with the death and disappearance of Bryon Macron.
Yeah, so maybe we didn't find the actual murder weapon, but it got the investigative juices flowing.
Yeah, it definitely did. And then Darren calls a couple days later with some really exciting news. Hey, Darren.
Hey, Rick, you'll never believe what I just got a hold of.
What?
I just got a hold of Mrs. Macron's private investigator, and I've been talking with him.
He's talking to you?
An interview, not just the private investigator, but also Mrs. Macron herself.
Oh, no way, man. We got to record that.
It's going to be great. It's going to have information that no one else has got. They feel like they're close to, they feel like they know who actually did this, and they've got plans of getting an indictment here soon.
Holy crap. Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get them. I talked to them for a half hour.
Okay, Danny, you know that we have an interview coming up with Bryon Macron's widow and with her private investigator. and they're going to be giving us some really good stuff, some things that I don't even think they talk to the news media about. In fact, I'm certain that this is the most definitive interview that anyone has ever conducted with Victoria Macron, the widow of Bryon Macron. And before we get into the interview with those two, though, let's bring Darren into the studio, and I want him to kind of go over the case with us, what got him into it, and just let's talk about some theories.
Yeah.
We're here now with Darren, our invisible shipmate.
It's good to be here. I thought, like being a brother-in-law and all, we'd be called like, seaman or something, but I think that's appropriate, but...
Anyway, welcome aboard, and we're glad that you're here because you know more about the Bryon Macron case than pretty much anybody out there, right? This has been a long-standing kind of fascination for you.
I don't know if I know more than anybody out there, but I definitely know what has been put out in the newspapers, and it's been a really exciting journey here so far as collecting all this stuff and starting the process of reaching out and different people that just want answers. And I think that we'll find that as we go forward, that people are really still in attune to this. They want answers. They want to know what happened to Bryon. They're not buying it.
Right. And the more that I think about this particular case, it's either the most complicated suicide or this man was murdered. And hopefully we have, you're going to get into that and kind of explain why you think that this was a murder, and I don't know, just educate us about Bryon Macron's case.
And real quick before you get started, too, I just want to point out that one of the advantages that you have here, Darren, is you live in Medina County, close to where this happened, and your work takes you through the small town and the whole area where this happened, and you were onto this case kind of right away when it happened because it was in the local news and it piqued all of our curiosity. So you've kind of been on the ground with this sort of the whole time. I mean, obviously you weren't actively investigating the whole time, but you were always kind of listening for any news, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have no investigative skills whatsoever. I am just a resident of Medina County. I read the news. I talk to people. I think all three of us have the ability to reason. But it's just I like Datelines, and it was like, oh my gosh, like as soon as this happened, this is something straight out of Dateline. Like Dateline's gonna pick this up, no doubt.
And didn't Dateline actually come to town and they just kind of never did an episode because there's no conclusion yet?
I know that Dateline interviewed Bryon's brother, that he interviewed with Dateline, but that's the only spot that I have found thus far that Dateline is looking into it.
The story has everything. Small town, family man that you would never expected coming, and then just the mysterious circumstances and unknown manner of his death that you're going to lay out for us here.
Yeah, I sit and talk with, my wife, and it's like, this is like a real life Clue game where you really just sit there and you just think, I don't know exactly who did this, but I think I know it's got to be one of the ones that I think we're going to talk about. But like I said, this is all amateur work.
Yes. We're not going to make any allegations. This is just all our kind of thoughts and sort of amateur investigation and interviews with some of the principals involved. An interview with Bryon's widow, Victoria, and her private investigator. So we do have some first-hand reporting.
What they say is what they say. It's not necessarily our opinion. We're going to let them speak freely. I think that if we're going to do the interview, we're going to do it right, and we're going to let them talk. Whatever kind of allegations they make that on their own.
I think at the end of the day, we just noticed that here in our own backyard, we have a very intriguing mystery and also a very tragic story that there's hurting people and a hurting family out there that wants answers. And, there wasn't really a whole lot out there about this.
And I do just want to make one thing clear. Victoria technically does not have a private investigator.
Okay.
The gentleman I've made contact with and will have on an interview, he is technically a retired federal criminal investigator.
This sounds more impressive.
It is. He's got, The more that I talk with him, he really knows his stuff. I mean, Victoria was fortunate to have somebody put the man hours in, and with the expertise that he has, he's definitely an asset to the case, no doubt. He knows more than I do.
Did Paul Hartman contact Victoria Macron, or did Victoria Macron find him? Like, how did they?
Victoria got a lawyer. Last name's Lily, and Lily knows Paul. Paul knows a lot of people in this area. He's just one of those guys that, the justice system, he's been in and out of quite a bit. Not from a personal standpoint, but from a work standpoint.
On the legal side.
Correct, yes. So, he knew Lily. He is frustrated before this with how cases get handled out here in Medina County. And I mean, just being out here and even since the Macron murder, I mean, there's another case I would love to talk about at some point, that just, it's just doesn't make sense. So he saw that. He didn't want Victoria to get railroaded. So from my understanding, he reached out through Victoria's lawyer, and they agreed, and he is doing this all pro bono.
Let's transition now into talking about Bryon Macron as a person, and then Bryon Macron's disappearance, and why this case is interesting, why it's not just a cut and dry missing person case, or even a cut and dry suicide or murder.
So, I mean, I think we're going to understand what we know about Bryon, and particularly what I'd like to do first, because I think there's going to be a lot of listeners that are going to be local, and I think it's good to other people that aren't so local and are just interested in the case in general. I think we need to paint the picture of what we've been through locally as far as, the information given at certain time points. So what I've done is I've pulled together information that's strictly from articles published of who Bryon was. So this is not anything that Victoria has said. This is stuff that's come from the different news, like the Akron Beacon, the Gazette, Cleveland Plain Dealer, stuff like that. So what we know is Bryon was a township trustee. He was elected in 2010. There was a vacancy at that point that he was able to fill. He did get reelected in 2015. So he lives in Lafayette Township. He was trying to get on the board for the school in 2013, but then I guess there was like a conflict of interest at that point. So active guy, active in his community.
Sort of a political career starting.
Yeah, he was. He was kind of starting this political career. He was a freshman football coach for Medina City, which is interesting because he's a father of 3 girls. So he's kind of got this desire, I think, as a man to do that. But originally, he isn't from Medina. He grew up in North Royalton. He met Victoria, which was his wife, in 1989. He's a jeweler, or worked for a jewelry business. He started working at a jewelry store as a teenager, so it was kind of like a high school job that he was doing. Yeah, he went to Tri-State. 1991, he was enlisted in the Marines. He was part of an anti-terrorism security team called FAST. He did go to Guantanamo Bay. He was stationed there.
So just sort of your upstanding all-American man that, which will be important later, would know how to take care of himself too, with the military background.
Right. Yeah, he had the training. He was a Marine. I mean, Marines are just tough. That's kind of like what we know about Bryon. Now, going to 2016. So this is, this is when it all happened. So December 15th. Of 2016. What we know based off of the newspapers was Bryon attended a social function with some colleagues. The colleagues that we knew were from different, at least Lafayette Township. We don't know exactly who all was there. We don't even know necessarily where it was. On the 16th,
So I heard that was at the Winking Lizard.
Well, we know that later. Okay. Yeah, but we didn't know that at the time.
Gotcha.
Of this is all based off the article, so this is kind of like when things came out and when the locals knew it. Okay. So when anybody following the case early on, that's all the information they had in the first article. On the 16th, that's when Bryon's office. So they put in trustee missing under suspicious circumstances. They located a car, but they did not provide the address. So all we knew was that's when everybody kind of knew who Bryon was at that point, as far as like that something weird was going on right before Christmas. They said that he was last seen at a county township association holiday party at Winking Lizard. So you're right, at the 16th, that's when they announced it in Brunswick. The day after he went missing, $8,000 was spent to replace the carpet and repaint the walls and ceiling of the township office. That was from the Beacon Journal, okay?
Yeah, that's highly suspicious.
That is, and that we will definitely be talking about more. So on the 21st, the BCI and FBI were involved. Now keep in mind, the 21st to the 16th, there's more than a day, right? So BCI, FBI involved. They report the office was ransacked. Reports blood was found in his office and his car, and released where his car was located. Reports that a colleague found the office early in the morning of 12/16.
Well, the Medina County Sheriff's Department says this case got started right here at the Lafayette Township Administration Building after a township co-worker contacted investigators about what looked like a possible altercation and suspicious activity at the offices here. The investigation revealed that Township trustee Bryon Macron was found to be missing under suspicious circumstances. Several hours later, police say Macron's abandoned vehicle was found 4 miles away here in this public parking lot on Beachside Boulevard in Chippewa Lake. This case involving trustee Macron has now triggered an official missing persons report. Anyone with information about this case is being asked to contact the Medina County Sheriff's Department. Reporting here in Lafayette Township, I'm News 5 investigator Joe Paganakis.
So he reports an altercation.
Sheriff reports altercation, however, does not want to read into it too far. And that was from David Sentner. Sentner is someone that you guys need to remember. That's someone who we'll be talking about.
He's the sheriff of Medina County at the time.
So he wasn't the head sheriff. Sheriff was Miller. Okay. He was in charge of the investigation. He is now the chief of police of Hinckley. But at the time, he was just a captain who was in charge of the investigation. Yeah. They would not report where the blood was found in the car. And they still, if I recall right, if we get to the end here, they never reported where the blood was found in the car. They wouldn't say.
That makes if it's in the front seat or the trunk, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Absolutely does. Bryon Macron had a meeting scheduled with the resident at the office that morning. Macron's office was found in disarray, and the sheriff believes there may have been an altercation. Well, if it was ransacked, I think that's a fair assessment, right?
If they have to replace the ceiling, that's...
Or paint the ceiling anyway.
Yeah, paint the ceiling the day after. Why? Why
Probably
so soon?
because the assailant painted the ceiling. That's what it sounds like, that there was blood.
Oof.
So on the 26th, the day after Christmas, that's when Darren Macron, that's the brother of Bryon, interviewed by Dateline and said somebody knows something. So already you can see that the family's starting to kind of wonder about this. He's the younger brother, and he said there is this gut feeling that we have something, that something is wrong, is what he's speaking for the family.
No kidding.
Something had to have happened. It's not him, as far as that Bryon's didn't just run off. There's this idea early on that Bryon just all of a sudden decided to up and leave and go to California and assume a new life.
Okay, but that would only make sense if you didn't find a trail of blood and an office destroyed before somebody would do that. Plus, you would also see lots of other things like money being moved around, right? Personal items gone, taken.
That would make a lot more sense.
I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not trying to belabor a point, but it makes no sense for the investigators to even go down that avenue with the evidence that they had.
If you found blood, enough that you need to paint walls, ceiling, replace carpet, spend $8,000. why would there be a rumor going around that he left?
Right.
And with no car, no wallet, no cell phone. Makes no sense. But it was out there, and it actually really derailed Mrs. Macron, which I think you guys will find later in an interview. So on the 7th...
Hey, I gotta stop you there, Darren. What's the last quote from Darren Macron?
There is this gut feeling that we have that something is wrong. I'll just say I'm putting my faith in the FBI.
So that's 10 days after Bryon goes missing, and that's just kind of already a strong statement to say, kind of dismissing the local police department or investigation team. That's 10 days later.
Right, early on. You know, I mean, you're still dealing with the idea that your brother's gone, and that your husband's gone, that your dad's gone. And they're already saying, what the heck's going on with this investigation? And they had no faith early on in the whole thing, as far as who was collecting evidence, and, you know, how much evidence are they collecting, and what are they looking into.
The evidence that they had, if they thought the guy ran off, then I would probably lose all respect for that investigation right away too.
Well, we don't know that the police did that.
Which we got to think about who Bryon was. If we go right up to the top, you know, he was a freshman football coach. He was trustee. He wanted to be on the school board. I mean, if anybody put their time and effort into the community, it's this guy.
Yeah.
So why would you leave the community you're working your butt off for?
Totally. And not to mention some of his projects that he was involved in as a trustee, as far as working really hard to get a new fire station built, and I know you'll get into it in a minute here, but like you said, he was very invested in his community.
Right. I mean, I think most people would say being a township trustee is not necessarily like a big badge of honor, but really like a labor of love.
Yeah.
You get paid not much money, and you get a lot of headaches, you know. It's a tough job, no doubt. And you know, I have a lot of respect for the trustees where I live. You know, like I said, they gotta put up with a lot, and they don't get a lot in return. It is for the betterment of the community that I think most trustees are out there for.
Absolutely.
Not much happened in January other than this vigil. Bryon's still gone. We go to February, and that's when Crime Stoppers gets involved. On the 10th of February, they put out a $5,000 reward. Still nothing happened. And then on the 21st was the big day of February. On February 21st, 2017, that was the big day.
A gruesome find in the water, leaving us with more questions than answers tonight. A kayaker on Chippewa Lake discovers a man's body, and it's close to where a missing township trustee's car was found.
Bryon Macron has not been seen since December 15th.
I thought that was, the only thing I thought was kind of interesting was, I mean, this kayaker was, he's got an interview out there, but, you know, he actually opened the eyelids and thought he was a mannequin at first, but he said that he felt that God brought him to that place to find Bryon. Felt that God brought him to that place to find Bryon.
They found their car, but they never found the body, and I thought, my goodness, could this be the missing man?
Frank Weber is talking about missing Lafayette Township trustee Bryon Macron, last seen more than 2 months ago. But at first sight, Weber didn't know what he had found.
It looked like a doll's head or maybe a mannequin.
But a closer look would warrant a call to 911.
Middle-aged man, been in the water quite a while.
It would be scary to find a body in there, even though, like he said, like, you know, it's obviously good that the body was found. That would be a frightening experience. But I couldn't imagine.
Especially touching it all up.
Right. You know what I think is interesting is, okay, so we've had this blood in this office, which we would imagine that they took for testing. Well, conveniently 2 days later after they find Bryon, that's when the prosecutor, Forrest Thompson, states that there's only one source. Also on the 23rd, that's the first time that you hear the other two trustees. So there's 3 trustees in Lafayette Township. Mike Costello, who we found earlier, was with Bryon at the movie. Then Bryon went home and then got up, went to the township, and then was missing. And then there's Linda Bowers, is the other township trustee.
She was kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah, Linda has done a lot. She seems like, I've never met Linda. I've never talked to Linda.
We reached out for comment, did we not?
We did. We reached out to Linda and Mike, and I have an email that I have to pull up and I'll read but they declined ultimately to interview. But yeah, Linda, it seems like she's one of those people that if there's something that needs someone to volunteer, she seems like she's kind of that person that's going to volunteer.
She's going to take over that bake sale.
She might. So she put out a statement saying, she didn't. They put out a statement to the township, and it says, "A man who deeply loved his family and his God, Bryon was so proud to represent the residents of Lafayette, a close-knit township that especially enjoyed his spontaneous wit and ready willingness to help others. Bryon was never afraid to roll up his sleeves and do whatever needed to be done. We will cherish the memory of Bryon's favorite encouragement. Make it happen." That was their statement. From my understanding, the 2 trustees really supposedly have talked to law enforcement, but other than that, have been very close-lipped about this whole case. And there will be a lot of different conversations to follow regarding concerns that some of the people we interview about Linda Bowers and Mike Costello.
Okay, so at this point, we have the body. So I'm assuming that, the medical examiner looks at the body. What are the authorities saying is the cause of death for Bryon? What do we know?
6 stab wounds. They noted it to be the shoulder, the neck, and the forearms. There was a deep wound on the left side of his neck. However, they said it did not hit any vital veins. 1 stab wound on the left of the neck was listed as superficial. They report nothing was in his airway, and that they do not know how long he was in the water.
So, did they ever say anything about wounds looking like defensive wounds or anything like that?
To my knowledge, not in that article.
So, but at this point, in April of 2017, we know it's 6 stab wounds from the shoulders, neck, and forearms. So, not on one location. And then found in the water, but no water in his lungs, so not drowning.
Hey, forearms sound like that's probably defensive.
Well, or if you're arguing suicide, it could be suicide, but
on your forearm,
it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do your shoulders, your neck, and your forearms for suicide, and you can't commit suicide by drowning if there's no water in your lungs.
The people want to know. I like I said, I work, in and around Medina County. I've talked to a fair amount of, not everybody, but I've talked to anybody I come in contact with down Chippewa Lake area. It's a conversation starter. It's better than asking how the weather is. I just come out and say, what do you think happened to Bryon? I don't have to say his last name.
That's totally true. Remember, Darren, you and I went to the Village Inn, which is a bar in Chippewa Lake, and it's almost right next to where they found Bryon Macron's car. We went in there and we started talking to some of the patrons, some of the people that have been part of the community for years, how they feel about the case and what they think happened.
Yeah, so we're in Chippewa right now at the Village Inn, and I'm just asking some people their impressions on the Macron case. Do you believe that Macron committed suicide, or do you think he was murdered?
I think he was murdered.
I think he was murdered. So you don't buy the suicide at all? Are you satisfied with the way that the investigation's gone? Do you think that the police are being open about it?
No. I think something's being hidden. You don't kill yourself and then go out in the water.
And it ain't one person doing it.
No.
So,
Yeah, it's shit.
dude, I couldn't roll them. I couldn't even roll them over.
No.
Two of you would have a tough time. And then you have to pick them up and throw them into the inlet brings it into the lake.
Right.
So he is dropped off at that bridge.
That's what I feel like too. I feel like that bridge is where he went in.
You know what it is, right?
Yeah, Chippewa Road. I think at this point, I think it'd be good to talk about the theories of what would have happened, what could have happened, what's the plausible things that we need to think about and consider.
Yes.
Okay, let's do that. But before we get into talking about motives and everything, I think that we should play this clip. It is from the Sheriff's Department when they held a press conference. And here you're going to hear David Setner, who is captain with the deputies. And he was also the head of Bryon Macron's investigation. And he's going to be talking about some of their findings. And just listen, because it sounds like they are trying to build a case that Bryon Macron acted alone and that this was a suicide. Even though the evidence that they have and that we have, it seems kind of hard to get our heads around this being a suicide, but nevertheless, that seems to be the route that the Sheriff's Department is trying to take. Just take a listen.
The purpose of this press conference is to provide an update of the investigation into the death of Bryon Macron, based on all the information that we have to date. As you know, the Medina County Sheriff's Office was notified of Mr. Macron's disappearance at approximately 7:30 a.m. on December 16th. Deputies were immediately dispatched to the Township Administration Building in the Macron home. And at this time, an investigation was opened and initiated. Within an hour and 10 minutes, Mr. Macron's vehicle was located via OnStar detection, parked in the beachside parking lot next to Chippewa Lake. It's important to note, leading up to Mr. Macron's death, that Mr. Macron himself had incurred a considerably large amount of financial debt, along with other personal behaviors he was engaged in that were unknown to his family and friends that we will not go into detail at this time. Video surveillance from area businesses and residences showed Bryon Macron's vehicle driving around the early mornings of December 16th. Which began with his arrival at the Township Administration Building at 1:50 a.m. His vehicle left the Township Building at approximately 6:24 a.m. and is observed passing a residence near the lake minutes later. Physical evidence processed by the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations from the Township Administration Building, as well as Mr. Macron's recovered vehicle, resulted in matching Bryon Macron's DNA. DNA and blood found in and around the bathroom sink and on the faucet matched only Bryon Macron. The bloody footprints located in the administration building were consistent with the shoes Bryon Macron was wearing at the time his body was recovered. No additional blood from anyone else was obtained in or around the administration building or in or around his vehicle. As a matter of due diligence and standard protocol, several emergency responders and township employees' DNA profiles were obtained in the case of cross-examination or cross-contamination of the scene. As the coroner stated earlier, the cause and manner of death listed on the autopsy is undetermined. Upon reviewing the autopsy report and the physical evidence, our investigators have determined that based on all the evidence obtained to date, that no other person other than Bryon Macron was involved in his death.
So in that press conference, Setner says they have video of him arriving at the trustee's office at like 1:45 a.m. or whatever, and then he leaves again at 6-something a.m. So he's like 4 hours of missing time in there, and then drives away. And then he mentions another camera caught the car, which we think might be that tavern in Chippewa Lake. And then they find the car. So why was he there? You know, just the thoughts go through your mind. If it's a suicide, do you go to work?
Why would you be there for 4 hours in the hall?
Yeah, and there's reports that he had an early morning meeting scheduled with, wasn't it a resident of the township maybe? There's lots of rumors about it.
So, I mean, it was supposed to be, but we don't know who that was. We've heard, just a resident. We've heard an angry resident. But either way, you're not going to, magically wake up and say, oh, yeah, I had that meeting at 7:30, let's say. gee, I think I'll get there around 2 a.m. You know? So, you know, and if it's a resident, like, why would you say, oh yeah, sure, let's just move your time up to 2 a.m. That's great, I haven't gone to sleep yet, you know? Or maybe I did, but now I'm awake. You know, it says no one. You know, no one's going to get up out of bed, go down there for an angry resident, right?
And then let's say that you did, and you had a fight with an angry resident, and then they leave, and you're so distraught from this fight that you decide to start to commit suicide as a Marine who, you know, I'm not a Marine, and I don't know what they learned, but I'm sure they learned how to handle a knife and how to kill someone to the point where it wouldn't take 6 wild stabs to figure out how to commit suicide, and then get in your car and drive to the lake and then disappear for a couple months before you're found.
Not to mention, get out of your car, leave no blood trail, which you did all over your office and in your car, and, you know, then all of a sudden magically disappear to the point where they can't find you. You know, I mean, I like to deer hunt. You know, it's you when you shoot a deer, you got the blood trail. That's what you follow typically. If you don't see it drop right away, you know, there's a trail. It's got to happen. Footprints. You know, it's not. It shouldn't be hard if the person's in dire straits.
There's a lot that doesn't add up about any of this, and I don't have a ton of knowledge about suicides, but a couple things that we do know just from looking at statistics is that men typically use firearms. I'm pretty sure that Macron was a firearm owner. 2, suicides don't normally happen in multiple locations, specifically because they're usually momentary crises that if the person stops the suicidal action for a while to, say, get in a car and drive somewhere else, most of the time that's enough to make the person seek help, or it's gonna stop. A suicide, it just doesn't fit.
No, that's a good point. There's actually interesting interviews with suicide survivors that like jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and still survived. And I remember one, the guy said, like, as soon as my feet left, I'm like, oh, I want to live.
Right, and I've seen those, and they say about 88. It's a very high number. The people that have their suicide interrupted by another person or whatever, they don't, you know, necessarily want to commit suicide again. Like you said, they're happy that they lived.
So I will say real quick, the only way that I could kind of wrap my mind around the suicide is if maybe 5 of those cuts were testing, and then the one cut in his shoulder was very deep and started bleeding freely, and he realized he wasn't dying, so he gets in his car. Maybe he wanted to go to the ER, and then he was confused from the blood loss and ended up at Chippewa Lake, or maybe he wanted to die somewhere scenic. That's the only way that would kind of make sense to me, but that seems like a stretch.
And also, most suicides don't happen at unfamiliar places. They're typically at your home. I mean, there's cases in jail where the person has no other choice. There's cases, you know, somebody at a hotel room, but typically psychologists say that you choose a very familiar and even meaningful place to commit suicide. So I guess we have to consider the possibility that Chippewa Lake held some significant meaning for him if it was a suicide. I can see the office being a place where he would have an opportunity if he went there at 2 a.m, and that was, you know, a place that he felt comfortable in and familiar with to do it. But again, it's hard for me to grasp starting it somewhere, stopping, getting in a car and driving.
Doesn't seem very likely.
Right.
No, not at all. And I mean, he didn't have any like previous things. I mean, you wouldn't go to a trustee's thing and then go see a movie, you know, and socialize, you know, normally. I mean, like, you know, you usually are more withdrawn at that point, you know.
Yep. Okay, so if suicide seems like an unlikely prospect, then to pretty much, barring some freak, like, natural explanation for somebody bleeding that much for natural causes, would have to be foul play, right? I mean,
you know,
yeah,
you can't talk to anybody around here that, at least I haven't found somebody that feels that suicide is anything reasonable here to look at. And I mean, like, to come to that conclusion, 6 months after this all happened, there's a lot of, at least from my aspect and what I've been doing, there's a lot of information here. And like I said earlier, it's like a real life Clue game. I mean, there is so many aspects that were going on there where things could have played right to cause this to happen. And, you just can't, throw in the hat this early.
So let's talk about some of the theories. So the first one, other than suicide, would be the most, in every murder investigation, the first place they look is always the spouse. So what is the theory behind how the wife could be the suspect?
Well, I mean, obviously Victoria, from now what we know, was the last person to see Bryon alive. So, the probability increases the closer people are with it. So
she saw him at 2:08 a.m. the morning that he left for the trustee office, is what we're thinking, or what's been reported.
So there's some discrepancies that we've found, as far as, I think Sentner says around 1:45 or 1:30 a.m. What we've found now, which we'll get into more later, is it looks like he was triggered to leave his home at 2:08 a.m.
That sounds like that's from a phone call or text or something. That's a really specific time.
Yeah, it's from something notified on his phone that got him out of bed, is what we understand now, which we will cover in later episodes.
So, for everything that Ms. Macron did from the moment he disappeared to this day, sometimes when you follow these cases, the spouse doesn't maybe act the way you'd expect them to. And that doesn't always mean that they're guilty, but it definitely might raise an eyebrow. Ms. Macron this whole time has done nothing but be right out there trying to find him. She was out there handing out flyers. I think they started at like a $10,000 reward for any information. So she certainly seemed, in my opinion, is not involved. It doesn't seem like someone involved.
When I think about back, when I didn't, now I kind of have like a little bit of a, personal kind of feeling on this case. But early on, when I didn't know who Bryon was, I just knew he was missing, and I was interested in it because of it being so local and such a mystery. I first thought like maybe the wife, like it might have been Victoria. She would have been like the last one to see him, and what kind of life insurance is out there, what kind of marriage did they have?
Right. That's why they're always the first place you look.
And the other part is like when you look at the articles, she really didn't have a voice for the first 4 or 5 months. So doesn't seem to be talking, at least into the media. So she's been kind of silent through this. So, you kind of start to wonder, you just don't know him, and so you kind of start to kind of question. So personally, I kind of questioned early on that I wonder if his wife did it.
Okay, but think about this. Because we know that Bryon was kind of a bigger guy, right? He's over 6 foot tall, over 200 pounds. And his wife, there's a podcast, we don't have photos or anything, but she is not a very big woman. So just from the logistics of being able to overpower him, stab him, and then move his body by herself to dump in a lake, doesn't seem like it would be very likely that she could do that on her own, for one. Two would be her opportunities are endless if she was going to kill him, and her options would be endless too. I mean, like, poison would have been something that she could have done. Anything. This would be a harder way to do it, I guess.
Right. I mean, he traveled selling jewelry. If she was going to hire a hitman, like, wait till he's going to Omaha or something.
Right. And I mean, I think the other, to kind of counter that, Ricky, I think to also think about, if we're getting off of the idea of suicide, then I think we're on a 2-person job at least. So there's got to, because you can't drive that car and then, unless you're just going to like hike it somewhere, after. So let's say if they killed Bryon, they got his car there, someone has to pick him up or get them away. So, I mean, you're really dealing with at least a 2-person operation. So, you know, that does kind of defeat, I mean, yes, I think if, you know, we were back in December 15th of 16 and we were going to have a fight and put bets on it, I don't think anybody's going to put a bet on Victoria beating Bryon on with really anything. He's going to be a sharper shooter. He's going to know how to handle a knife. He's just overall larger, stronger than Victoria. So I agree with that, but I think we got to factor in a 2-person job here.
What it looks like is the murderer put him in his own vehicle, right, in Bryon's vehicle, or you have to go with the suicide that Bryon drove himself there. But if it's a murder, that's a good point, that it would be a 2-person job.
Which is why I wish we knew where in the car the blood was located. So if it wasn't the wife, then the next place to look, if you're going out through the circles, was obviously this happened at the township. So could the trustees be involved, or the people that he would be meeting with, you know, and working with at the township building?
Right. So we know that Mike Costello saw him. He went to the movie with him. We don't know who else went to the movie with him, but we do know Mike was there. And he was, I believe, also at the Winking Lizard with Bryon. So they spent majority of the night together. What we don't know is we don't know the relationship between Mike and Bryon. We don't know. I mean, obviously he wasn't the last person to see him. Could he have been somebody to get Bryon down to that office at 2:08 in the morning? Possibly. You know, they shared a mutual interest down there. Why would they need to be down there in the middle of the night? Doesn't make a ton of sense, you know. But so trustees, you know, possibly. They also have not talked. Other than they do say that they made a statement to law enforcement, but as far as like anything that, you know, we the people can decide and weigh in on, we really don't have much on them. We do have a little bit, which we'll give you guys later on. If you've done the digging, you might be able to find some of it. I do have one statement that I guess no one else really has because it was through email. But
that's why you come to us, because we have sources that nobody else has.
We do have information, and we're not here to hold it from you guys. We're here to give it as directly and honestly as we can. We're not here to be biased. We're also not here to make enemies of anybody. You know?
Here, I can read the statement from Linda Bowers. So, here's her statement. Out of respect for Bryon's family and the ongoing BCI investigation, Mike Costello and I have never interviewed about the case publicly. Our only comments, even at the onset of his disappearance and recovery, have been limited to what we felt necessary to assure the public we serve of their safety. Unfortunately, even that upset Bryon's wife tremendously. As we have many requests for public interview, we respectfully decline. Linda Bowers.
Wow, she's shooting down the widow.
I did not really give. I just said thank you so much for your time. I believe as a response. It is interesting. It is a dicey situation as far as the relationship between them. And I don't know all the relationship or anything. And I don't claim to know it. But I when I read that, I thought, okay, but I've interviewed Victoria for 4.5 hours, and she laid it all on the line, and she wants her voice to be heard. So we're not doing anything that the family doesn't want. They want this. They want this out. So
you're saying that respect for the family line is bullshit, right?
I think so.
Political speak of we don't want to talk.
I think she doesn't want to talk, which, we're not here to make anybody talk. But we want to, the people want to know. We've been waiting for 3.5 years for information on this. It's a local guy who did good to our community. We deserve answers.
I will just say, to play devil's advocate, they may have a lawyer that wrote that up for them and just said this is what you say to anyone who asks.
Sounds like lawyer talk.
Yeah, it does. And, if there's any interesting facts, Linda Bauer's husband is a lawyer.
No, yeah.
So there you have it. But so we got the trustees. We've got the complex of the trustees. There's also another player in there to consider, and that would be the maintenance man that found him as well.
We're talking about this, I guess. I'm wondering, why would the trustees even have a motive to kill their coworker who everyone seemed like they liked?
Well, there was a lot of things going on in the township in 2016. The township had a fire levy, and it had the Nexus pipeline going through it, which are both very interesting things, and conveniently on the same property.
And they were both kind of contentious too, right?
Oh gosh, you mean if anybody locally remembers all the signs of how everybody hates Nexus?
Yeah.
No one liked Nexus in Medina. Well, I shouldn't say that. Most people didn't like Nexus in Medina County. Maybe somebody who benefited off of like a pumping station or something like that placed on your land where you got a large sum of money, then maybe you would like that. But I think everybody else, they got their yards dug up, their trees removed, and then also are now in like a fallout zone of if the line were to catch fire.
So we're talking about is a gas pipeline, right? Pressurized natural gas that was going to go from these oil fields in eastern Pennsylvania and deliver the gas all the way up into Canada, I think. And a lot of places where it went through, they used eminent domain and took people's property away from them. And in Medina County, it was a big deal because a county judge even had to do like an injunction and give people restraining orders from their own property to allow the surveyors for this pipeline to go through and decide, what's going to happen to your property. So people were super offended. And then this pressurized natural gas, Danny, it has a blast radius within like 2 or 3 miles, so that if it ever did go up, I mean, like all of us basically are in this kill zone.
And so if you're just the average Joe that just has the pipeline going through and no special pumping station, did they give you any money or what? Or they just ruined your landscape?
I don't know if they gave you any money. They maybe a little bit, but it's going to kill your property value. So it's an offset. The only people that got windfalls are the people that have pumping stations and stuff like that on their actual property.
Yeah, above ground structures, I think, mostly got money. But yeah, I don't know about the people that just went underground. I didn't hear of anything, but I'm not the. I did actually reach out to a Nexus, a negative Nexus group, but I never did hear back from them.
But that is definitely something that gets emotions high and tensions high with, corporations coming from out of state, out of town, and taking your property, and the government helping them.
Oh, well, you already lost because it was at the state level and the federal level. It was a done deal. And they do this with fracking too. They change the laws, like overrule home ordinances that change people's city zoning codes and stuff like that. Like, you really don't have any power. They decided that it's coming through, and it's coming through. And
from my understanding, there is a little bit of pull early on. So, I mean, there's always a question. And if you watch, and I kind of looked at the Nexus pipeline and seen how it, you'd think it'd be what's the, shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, right? Look at the Nexus pipeline. Yeah, it's got somewhat, but there's so many different waves and different things that it kind of zigzags around. I mean, it could have easily gone a little bit farther south and could have been a straight shot, but no, it kind of curves up through and spends a fair amount of distance inside Lafayette Township. So that it's kind of interesting how it gets so close to Medina, but it does seem like there is some advantages. Like for instance, Cloverleaf, the pumping station was put in Cloverleaf School District. So they're in the process of actually getting an influx of money towards the school because it increased that property value. So Cloverleaf School District benefited from the pipeline. We don't know how much yet. There was a large amount, and then of course Nexus went in and promised all this large sum of money, and then all of a sudden they're retracting it now and trying to get less. So it's a dispute currently, but there is benefits to the pipeline, but it benefits a very small few and hurts a whole lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to say that without any further kind of details or leads on that is a believable scenario, but just as likely as any of them There's nothing especially tying this to the pipeline.
That's the tough part, yeah, and it's very hard to find that stuff because, we don't have access to that kind of stuff. But we got the pipeline coming through. Interestingly, there's a fire levee, and part of the property, which I found was very interesting, was managed by a company called Medina Port Authority. And it's called Innovation Park. Innovation Park is where locals know Innovation Park, but it's where the University of Akron building is. It's overall vacant, although they are working on a company coming in now. But interestingly enough, the township was going to inherit the property where the fire station was going to get put on, not inherit, but be given it by Medina Port Authority in exchange for changing the zoning laws of Innovation Park to allow companies to come in, because it's basically sat dormant since 2003, I believe. It was, I think, originally started.
Right. So basically right now it's zoned like it's light, like super light industrial and kind of residential, right? Because it's near homes, and they want to zone it to allow a little bit more of a manufacturing base.
I don't even know if it was light industrial. It was like they wanted a tech company to come in. Now, mind you, they had crap internet there, but they wanted a tech company to come in basically and be there. So it was just like, it would be like this office building basically, and they were trying to.
In the middle of nowhere.
Out, yeah, not necessarily in like a primo spot. And they were trying to like and they gave land to this University of Akron to put a building in, which they did.
It's like a satellite campus or something.
Yeah. I don't know what's really run out of there, but their idea was that they were having education with technology, but they didn't have technology. Now, Medina Port Authority is upping their game for it, and they're running high-speed internet to that location, but they're sitting on this land trying to develop it, and they can't because of the zoning. So they worked with the trustees at that point. Now, they didn't have that set in stone at the time that Bryon went missing, but that was in the month, I believe. They were working on the zoning, changing the zoning regulations. So you can imagine the different deals that, aren't, like, we're not seeing. You've got builders, you've got people that want to bring business in there from the Medina Port Authority. There's some very wealthy people that are on the board there that could have had a lot of big money interest into Lafayette Township at that point, and Bryon could have been a snag in that spot. We don't know. This is all speculation.
Right.
Yeah.
There's lots of money floats around in those deals, and if you've ever sat in on any kind of town meetings when developers come and try to not have to pay taxes for 50 years if they develop there or whatever, there's always tons of money being talked about. So definitely, whenever there's money, there could be issues.
Emotive, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's the same property that Nexus went straight through the pipe. So that's the other part is like you're trying to get this fire levy approved on property that you don't even know where you're going to be able to put that building because you don't know where Nexus is going through. And you're asking these people, I believe the fire station was like $4.6 million building. That's a hefty bill to be, handled by those residents. There's not a lot of industry. There's very little industry in Lafayette Township. So it's mostly shouldered by the residents. For a fire station when they already have fire. So, there was, and Bryon was for the fire levy. So angry resident, what was he coming, if it was an angry resident, we knew there was a resident, some people said it was an angry.
Yeah, this is the other theory, right? An angry resident could have killed him.
Yeah, we've got information saying resident, and we've got information saying angry resident. So, there's some discrepancies, and so our goal is to be as straightforward with the listeners on this case as we possibly can. So, Rick, we're putting together there's a website out there, right, that they can go check it out?
Yeah, if you go to invisibleshipspodcast.com, we have show notes, and so we're making one now where it's just going to be kind of the depository of all our Bryon Macron investigation stuff that Darren mostly has uncovered, but everything from the news articles that you're referencing, your timeline, things like that. So if you're curious, definitely go to invisibleshipspodcast.com and check that out.
Yeah, so we're trying to be as straightforward. You the listener, listen to this, listen to the interviews, and then you decide where the flaws are, where things need to be investigated further. Our goal, like I said, is to promote awareness for this, and hopefully, if we get enough people, which I believe we do, interested in this, it's going to push that investigation further. We all want answers.
That's going to do it for this episode. Join us next time as we sit down and talk to Victoria Macron and her investigator in what is going to be a fascinating interview. Also, I want to make sure that you don't miss any of our upcoming podcasts. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We also have a webpage that we mentioned earlier that's invisibleshipspodcast.com, and you can even find us on Twitter. Our hashtag is @ShipsInvisible. We'd like to hear from you, and if you enjoyed this episode, please rate us on iTunes. That just helps get the word out, helps people find the show. Also, and this is probably the most important thing I'm going to say, Macron's family is still looking for answers about what happened to him. So if you know anything, if you have any tips or leads, contact Crime Stoppers or the Medina County Sheriff's Department. And thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.